Now, by this time in 1884, European empires had continued to grow, as had the resistance of enslaved Africans. The European forces looked to Africa to extract natural resources and cheap labour. To avoid a monumental clash of European imperial forces in warfare, Western Europe negotiated areas of Africa to colonise. Essentially, the European forces sat around a table and they took out a map and they carved up Africa for their own doing, or for their own profit. European occupation jumped from 10% to 90% of the continent being under European occupation. This was made possible via a combination of military, political, and economic domination. As we have seen in the Murdock Map, Murdock Map is where we can see the different ethnic groups within Africa in all its diversity. And we can see now that new false borders were created, dissecting the old tribal and ethnic borders which were there for hundreds of thousands of years before and took hundreds to thousands of years to create. The old borders, as a result of tribal, religious, territorial relations, were completely demolished. This means that tribes who had distanced each other or distanced themselves from each other due to age-old feuds were now in very close contact. Or even worse, tribes were being ruled by leaders from enemy tribes. These artificial borders led to widespread corruption, civil unrest, and inequality. An example is the BIAFRAN War in Nigeria, which saw a power vacuum as Nigeria gained independence from British colonial rule. Up to 3 million people died in conflict and resultant starvation. Dutch and British forces forced native South Africans and other tribesmen off of their lands and used apartheid regime to restrict native African freedom and economic development. So once again, we're seeing desperation emerge from a people, and these individuals these different tribes coming into close contact despite having formed natural distance from each other over tens, hundreds and thousands of years. Now, my task to you is I want you to imagine your friends and your colleagues or fellow students. You will have naturally migrated away from those whose company you're not too fond of and towards those whose company you're naturally quite fond of. I want you to explore what would happen if you were forced to work or live with those individuals who you were not very fond of. Would you be more productive, less productive? Would you be happier, unhappier, considering that a lot of these individual tribes spoke completely different languages as well? Another task for you, African American sociologist W.B. Du Bois said, "It dawned upon me with a certain suddenness that I was different from the others, or like mayhap in heart and life and belonging, but shut out from their world by a vast veil." Now, he is speaking about his realization that he was different as an African American in comparison to the European Americans and how he was shut out from their society. He coined the term double consciousness. He explained that because African Americans had had their identity stripped from them and had had little control over their fortune, that they were forced to see themselves through the eyes of European Americans. So because these Africans were taken away from their homeland, they had their culture, their name, their religion taken away from them. They had no sense of identity apart from the perception of the Europeans. The perception of the European Americans then became their identity. The common European American perception of African Americans was negative, racist, and deeply stereotypical. If you were forced, so this is my question to you, if you were forced to see yourself in a negative light, how do you think this would make you feel? How would this affect your development as a person? Please discuss these questions as a group, and whenever you're ready, under the guidance of your teacher, we can progress on to the next part of the presentation after you have finished exploring these questions.